It's a part of American life. When something is no longer useful to you, you give it to Goodwill. You drop it in the Goodwill box, perhaps in the supermarket parking lot near you, and you've then done something good with something you no longer considered good. You may know that Goodwill donation centers employ disabled workers, but you may not realize that some of those workers are legally exempt from minimum wage protection. That means some end up making just pennies per hour. It is legal, but tonight Harry Smith takes on the question of fairness.
Goodwill, a place where you feel good about leaving your old clothes, a place where you feel good about shopping in a tough economy. Goodwill's mission is to give jobs to people who are down on their luck or have a disability. Goodwill does a lot of good, no question about it.
Good job, Harold.
But in back rooms like this one in Great Falls, Montana, out of sight of donors and shoppers, there's something going on that many disabled people do not feel so good about. People with disabilities working for less than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. There are even places in America where Goodwill workers earn as little as 22 cents an hour. And because of a loophole in the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, it's all perfectly legal.
That's ridiculous.
Harold and Sheila Leland have been married for more than 20 years. Both are blind and both have college degrees. Sheila worked at the Goodwill facility in Great Falls, Montana, earning about $3.50 an hour for 4 years. She says she quit last summer when they lowered her wage to $2.75 an hour.
At $2.75, it would barely cover my cost of getting to work. I wouldn't make any money.
They call the facility the plant, and Harold still works there. It operates what's called a sheltered workshop. Here, the disabled get virtually guaranteed employment, but they are not guaranteed minimum wage. And that doesn't matter to some of the workers. Jeremy Davidson loves it here.
You love it here.
I love it here more than the world, yes. I also love NASCAR, but this and NASCAR are my two favorite things in life.
But for others, it is a dead end, a job of last resort in a world in which there are few options.
What's your wage right now?
$5.46 an hour.
$5.46 an hour.
Yeah, and that could change in a few months.
It could change because sheltered workshop wages are determined by a speed test every 6 months. Goodwill staff use a stopwatch to see how many items of clothing Harold can hang in a minute.
You're allowed 2 mistakes, and then anything else after that, your quality is considered poor, so your percentage of wage goes down.
We talked with 3 advocates for the disabled, all of whom are disabled themselves.
I wouldn't pay anybody a sub-minimum wage because I'm not willing to tell people day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year that they're not worth it.
Dr. Mark Maurer, president of the National Federation of the Blind, has been leading the fight to ban sheltered workshops altogether.
The sheltered workshop system takes people and systematically tells them they're not as good as the rest of the workforce.
We found Department of Labor records showing hourly wages for Goodwill workers in Pennsylvania as low as 22 cents an hour, 38 cents, 41 cents, 44 cents. The list of wages under $2 an hour goes on and on. But that's only part of the story. While some Goodwill workers are making pennies, their bosses are faring a bit better. A half-dozen regional Goodwill CEOs make $400,000 a year or more. Many others make nearly that much. In 2011, the CEO of Goodwill Industries of Southern California took home $1.1 million in salary and deferred compensation.
For someone who is an advocate for the disabled, how does that sit with you?
Is my head spinning right now? Because that's how it sits with me.
Kathy Stefke once worked at a Goodwill. She's a disability rights activist based in Wisconsin.
How can anybody possibly go into human services thinking they're going to get rich and do so on the labor of the most vulnerable citizens that we have? How can that be fair or ethical?
What's more, Goodwill grosses almost $5 billion a year. Advocates are outraged that a tax-exempt nonprofit that gets hundreds of millions of dollars in government funding does not pay some of its workers minimum wage.
Does it feel like exploitation to you?
It is exploitation. It is unquestionably and clearly exploitation.
Ari Ne'eman is president of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network.
They're able to collect charitable donations. They're able to present themselves as doing good work, and yet they don't have to do right by their workers.
Ari, let me ask you this. If I'm an executive from Goodwill, one of my arguments is I'm paying wages that are commensurate with the ability of the people who you smile, with the people who I have in my workshop.
I think that if you had a person with a stopwatch standing outside your office on any given day and assessed as compared to some hypothetical other broadcaster how productive you are, I think the result would be somewhat arbitrary.
Jim Gibbons, president and CEO of Goodwill Industries International, dismisses Goodwill's critics.
When the elitists try to define somebody else's success, that's not only insulting to me in terms of the work that I'm trying to accomplish, but to the individuals who have goals that they've established for themselves.
So the people who we've talked to who say that this is a civil rights issue, you would say they're elitists?
I would say that every individual has a right to define success for themselves.
Gibbons, who himself is blind, made more than $500,000 in 2011. He insists Goodwill's pay scale and sheltered workshops is fair.
As I look at some of the hourly wages, $1.52, 58 cents an hour, $1.30. This just goes on and on and on.
You know, Harry, no matter what the person's issues are, whether it's a disability or anything else, what you see is everything's focused on the individual, their goals, their skill sets, and their abilities.
Your regional CEOs, some of them are making $500,000 or more. How do you justify that disparity?
I think these leaders are having a great impact in terms of new solutions, in terms of innovation, and in terms of job creation.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm looking at a company that makes so much money. It looks to me like you've got the money to pay these people minimum wage.
The whole driving force and why Goodwill has such a major impact in the communities that they're a part of is because Goodwills in our history have always been market-driven. It's really just that simple. If you don't let that happen, then you're not around for the next day.
Gibbons says with a total workforce of more than 110,000 people, Goodwill employs between 7,000 and 8,000 people with disabilities whose pay, according to the Fair Labor Standards Act, can be below minimum wage. He says Goodwill gives people with the most severe disabilities an opportunity to work, an opportunity they would not otherwise have. He says for many of the people who make less than minimum wage, the experience of work is more important than the pay they get.
It's typically not about their livelihood. It's about their fulfillment. It's about being a part of something, and it's probably a small part of their overall program.
But for Harold and Sheila Leland, Gibbons' words sound out of step with their complaints. They say they do need the money, and they could be productive in their own right with the right job, a job better suited to their abilities.
I thought that it would be a really good thing if I could answer the phone at the plant and take messages and deliver messages. But that was poo-pooed.
It's the obligation of management to figure out how to use people's talents, not the obligation of the worker to fit into some box that the manager dreams up and says, regardless of your disability, this is your job, and if you're not any good at it, that's your fault, not mine.
And is that the way you feel some of these Goodwills operate?
It is exactly how they operate.
It's a question of being able to be treated like a first-class citizen in this country and have the rights of other people to work to obtain the things they need and to be the people that they can be. It's a civil rights issue for me.
Harry Smith here with us. You said you set out just to shed light on this, and some of this just don't seem right.
Yeah. This is a conversation that's been going on in this community for some time now, and we wanted to maybe make the conversation a little bit bigger. Yeah. And on some levels, it's so black and white, and on other levels, it certainly is gray. If you're the family member of a disabled person who finds some way to get more self-meaning in their life by being able to get a job in a sheltered workshop, that may be really profound and may be a life-changing and life-enhancing experience. But for these disabled advocates, they say that model is out of date. That goes back to a different time in our country, and it's time to get into the 21st century.
Powerful story, well told. Thank you, pal.
Thanks for the opportunity.
As always.